Hello, welcome to week 2 of these talks on YouTube. This week I offer you two topics, both an Arthurian legend. The first is the idea of idealism versus pragmatism, and the second is the idea of misogyny in Arthurian legend. So idealism is living by your ideals at all costs, whereas to be pragmatic is to be more practical about matters. The actual dictionary definition that I looked up is to deal with things based on practical considerations rather than theoretical ones. A good example of this is actually seen in our government nowadays. For instance, there's a new law that's been passed in the state of Illinois in the last 6 months or so that actually allows illegal immigrants to actually get driver's licenses, which allows them to then get insurance. If you're focused on the ideals of the situation, this seems ludicrous. Why would you allow illegal immigrants who are in this country illegally to obtain a legal driver's license? And there is some truth to that argument that it is, in a way, kind of ridiculous. From a pragmatic point of view, however, it actually makes sense to have this law passed and do this. Because they're here in this country anyway, they're driving anyway. It's better to have them legally trained on how to drive a car and legally insured, so that, for instance, if I'm the other driver, the legal American insured driver, and an illegal immigrant driver runs into my car and damages it, that since he could therefore be licensed and insured, that I can still not be screwed over by this. So there's a practicality situation here, but the ideal, of course, seems weird to be, in a sense, rewarding people for having done something illegal. So that's kind of where the battle is. In our romance stories, our heroes live on their ideals. They are very idealistic. They are not very pragmatic. Our two examples that I'm going to talk about are Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and the tale of Sir Lancelot de Lake. So Gawain gets tricked into a game where basically he's going to forfeit his life. The game starts with the Green Knight coming in, challenging any of the Knights of the Round Table to a game where they can hit each other with axes. Everyone thinks that Gawain will just hit the Green Knight and kill him, but of course he survives it through magic. And basically this leads Gawain into a situation where he's probably going to die when we're considering the Green Knight is a giant green guy, basically the Incredible Hulk with an axe. So this is probably not something that he's going to survive if he goes through with the game. And instead of refusing to go based on the fact that the Green Knight clearly used trickery, he used magic to, of course, keep himself alive even though his head's been cut off, Gawain doesn't allow that to be an excuse. He still goes out there and is going to put his own neck on the line, quite literally, even though he's been tricked. But really, shouldn't you realize that a big giant green guy who's, practically the Incredible Hulk, shouldn't you realize that there's probably some magic involved there? Shouldn't you have seen this coming? Meanwhile, in the tale of Sir Lancelot de Lake, Lancelot's in a little bit different of a situation. His life isn't necessarily in jeopardy, but he is kidnapped by 4 enchantresses, including Morgan Le Fay, who take him into a prison and force him to choose one of them to be his paramour, his lover, basically. He holds to his ideals and actually refuses all 4 of them, but the risk of this is that he's in a prison cell and there's no reason why these queens would allow him out until he changes his mind and does choose one of them. So by refusing them, he basically is risking being locked away for the rest of his life. Now, in both examples, we're talking about romance stories, and the good guy always wins in romance stories, so both Gawain and Lancelot end up getting out of this unharmed, but it's not necessarily something that's a sure thing. Lancelot could have been in prison for the rest of his life. Gawain could have gotten his neck cut right off and he would have been done, obviously. So even though they end up winning, it's not necessarily because that's how real life works, obviously. It's just how these romance stories work. Now, to some degree, there is something incredibly noble about living to your ideals in such a way, and it's absolutely necessary that we have people that are willing to live by their ideals, but sometimes living by your ideals instead of living in a more pragmatic style is just incredibly stupid. And when you consider the risk-reward, especially for Gawain, the only thing that he does if he doesn't go is he breaks his word. However, by going, he's potentially losing his life. Now it's time to get out of here, but I still want to talk. So misogyny. Misogyny is an important thing here. And what misogyny is any attitude that is hateful towards women. It doesn't have to be directly hateful, like advocating violence, but if it actually diminishes their value as people simply because they are women, that's still misogyny. And that's something that we do see in King Arthur and King Arthur stories. I'm in a completely different place. Well, anyway, I guess I'll keep talking about misogyny. Anyway, in the tale of Sir Lancelot, well, hello there. In the tale of Sir Lancelot, we see more misogyny. At one point, Lancelot, when he's actually being imprisoned by Morgan Le Fay and the other enchantresses, actually mentions that he'd be willing to fight any champion that they come up with, and that would prove that Guinevere is a more worthy lady than any of them. Now, the misogyny here may seem kind of subtle in comparison, but what this is basically implying is that the queens have no value as a person by themselves. That the only value that a woman can have is basically based on the men that are willing to fight for them. So that's where the misogyny comes in this instance. Now, to end this whole thing, let's have a joke from Mr. Hull.
Who is the roundest knight in Sir Arthur's court?
Who is it?
Who is it? Circumference.
By the way, best tripod ever. Nothing but literature books and J.R.R. Tolkien. Well, and zombies and unicorns.